Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting, or the Select Board meeting. I'm still getting used to that too. For Monday, March 15th, call to order at 6:34 p.m. on a still sunny evening, which is amazing. We use a product called GoToWebinar for this meeting format. All content is recorded. You can join in a listen-only mode via phone, or you can join in a participative mode via online or mobile application. A couple examples of how to either raise your hand or enter a question in the question box, and at the discretion of the chair, we'll attempt to take questions. And those questions, and all submitted, will be part of the record. Okay. Discussion regarding town response to COVID-19.
We don't have any formal updates from the governor yet, though the information that he released 2 weeks ago was that the next anticipated change would be for March 22nd. So I checked again late this evening or late this afternoon, and there still was no new update. So typically Tuesdays and Thursdays tend to be the dates that the office is releasing these changes. So we will monitor tomorrow. If we have something, we'll be sure to send it to you all. And if it doesn't come tomorrow, we'll check again on Thursday. But I do anticipate if we move into phase 4 that we will need to reconvene the department heads and have a conversation about what does that mean in each of our service areas to bring a proposal back to the two of you.
Okay. Bill, I had one thought, and it isn't fully formed, and I don't know where we want to go with it yet, but
Okay.
as the CDC update came, I think last Monday or so, about changes regarding, social distancing and mask wearing and such for people who've been fully vaccinated, a couple of weeks post-vaccination. I did wonder if we should think about our 100% mask policy currently as it applies to departments, potentially once all staff in that department and in that facility has been, fully vaccinated. And it probably applies to public safety first. And I'm just thinking out loud, wondering, do we relax that maybe as if the full department is vaccinated, as well as any cleaning staff or anyone who's going to be in that building on a regular basis, then do we relax it potentially for people by themselves in their private offices or even in vehicles, as long as we're maintaining good protocols? Just a thought, because if everyone in that space is vaccinated, then the guidelines are much more relaxed currently. Now, not to say people can't, obviously, if we do make a change, but just that they're allowed to not wear if they wish.
Right. Yeah, I my understanding was that the CDC was still requesting that people keep their social distance as well as wear a mask. So I wouldn't have a problem relaxing it within the vehicles or in their office. And I may not have a problem as long as they were apart from each other.
Right. Yeah, I'm fine with that as well. I mean, I think if they're having meetings or, you're having two people in a vehicle, then we need to maintain the protocols just because. Right. Or, if they have someone else in the vehicle of any town staff or not.
Right.
But yeah, that's what I was thinking. As departments get vaccinated, that may make sense in their private spaces and when they're in a space alone. So
do we have any general idea as to how this is going town-wise? I mean, are there people resistant to doing that, getting vaccines, or I haven't heard anything from anyone, so I don't know.
Are you talking about citizens or town staff?
The town staff.
I was just gonna say, as the priority phases have been approved by the state and vaccine eligibility has been opened up, Chief Wonka has been our conduit for coordinating with the regional vaccination sites and notifying departments.
Mhm.
So as of last week, we finally got the announcement that the school staff was now eligible to sign up for their vaccinations. So he was coordinating that information with the school administration staff and trying to get them in communication with the different vaccination sites, noting that we still have a bit of a bottleneck of the supply that encountered that snag a few weeks ago. So no, we're going to keep making folks aware of these opportunities, and then it's just a matter of getting documentation from the individual employees that they've been vaccinated to move towards what you and the chairman are discussing. But it's obviously not a requirement of the town to be vaccinated. So some staff members may elect not to, and so we're going to have to think out what those policy implications are.
Okay.
Maybe, I think, Bill, to at least anecdotally, what I understand is those who've been eligible to have generally been interested. So I don't know that it's across the board, but yeah, I think the general sentiment seems to be people are wanting to get it when they can. Maybe what we can do is Brian and I can work on maybe drafting some adjustment to our mask policy, our current masks, policy, and based on incorporating, vaccination status of a department and the building they're in and all of those different factors and how that would look, and bring it back in a couple weeks to the next meeting, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That works for me.
Okay.
All right, we can do that. Next item of business is library construction project update, review change order requests. There's no new updates there. Brian, just a question on the solar. I know there was a communication issue we resolved, but
Great.
is that still an issue between Eversource recognizing our generation and our actual generation?
That was our understanding, and we sent that correspondence. We inquired with our contact at Eversource in the department that was responsible for commissioning the solar array. They did some preliminary research and couldn't find our situation to be an issue for them. So I resent to them exactly what I received in terms of who the contact person was and what they were stating. We have not gotten a response from that. And so just this afternoon, the library director also reached out to Eversource to remind them that we are still waiting on an update from that. So between Natani's office and myself, we're going to keep trying to force the issue with Eversource until we get some type of confirmation. Our review of the electric bills did not make it very clear whether or not we were getting credits for the energy that we were producing. So we're going to keep working on that.
I think I saw one of those, and I do know someone who's on Eversource with a system, not this large, obviously, but and it did not look like they're recognizing the generation from what I saw. And I mean, based on our monitoring of the system, which is now up to date through today, I mean, we've generated almost 7 megawatts, so you should be showing some reduction, right?
Right.
And I don't think we're seeing any, so definitely.
It's concerning.
I guess I would say, in another week or so, if we're not hearing anything from anyone that's moving, what do we, let's take a next step, and if we need to get involved or whatever that looks like.
Absolutely.
Is there a specific reason why they're not recognizing the generation?
I think that's what we don't know.
Oh, okay. I remember when we had our hookup, it took a while for that to take place, and it seemed like that lagged behind everything else. And they kept saying to us, we're not counting anything. You're not up and running until we say you are. And it sounds like the same mode.
Well, I'd agree with you, except that was for months. If I remember the emails, that was 2 or 3 months of the solar arrays done waiting on Eversource. And then I understood that they gave the okay to operate, and we turned it on, and then they had to change a meter, and then they were still saying they were seeing nothing. And I mean, now, if I'm not mistaken, that was December or January, and we've had a fair amount of production, you know, for the winter months on that
Right.
array, and they're still saying it's zero. And I mean, it's not prime time, as you and I know, for summer solar, but they're still making some, and if they're not seeing it, then that's not helping us at all right now. So
Agreed.
Okay.
hopefully we'll have news by the next meeting, but we'll keep,
Yes, we'll keep.
Okay.
River Warner Strachan Street project update and change orders.
No update.
Okay, I was gonna say, I think draft got put together of what, you know, where we're at, and we're waiting on a final review before we send it over to the contractor to get a response. So
Correct.
we will probably have an update at the next meeting on that. We'll come back to the budget and revenue at 7. Discussion regarding Church Street Bridge and traffic plan. I believe we still have not seen anything.
Still waiting to hear from MassDOT and receive that official letter. We're checking every day.
I think at this point, you know, I have no idea whether that means it's a few days away in the mail or if it's months away. But we'll go ahead and leave it off unless we have an update on the project to, you know, the engineering side, or to the actual, you know, receipt from MassDOT. So we'll take it off till then.
Okay.
Discussion regarding the Route 2 pump station sewer line repair project. I believe we have Pete on tonight as well.
It's on. Yep.
We had issued, Brian had issued the request to get a emergency waiver on procurement requirements, and I believe that went to DCAM, is that right?
Correct.
And they approved our request today. So Brian, you can outline what that means, but basically I think we're doing an extremely short competitive bidding request, and that's, or I shouldn't even call it that, I guess.
Right.
Will you define what we are going to do and what that timeline looks like?
Yes, sir. So we did receive an emergency waiver that waives the requirements for the advertising that we typically would go through for a project like this. Even with that, we still have to reasonably still maintain aspects of the competitive bidding process. And so we will be soliciting at least 3 quotes. We don't have to receive all 3, but we have to at least solicit 3. And I told them that we'd give 5 days for a response. So my goal is for us to have a quote in place for next week that you all can then review at your next meeting. And the goal would be to award it, obviously, in every other way with the public procurement law. So it would go to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder at that point. So we will draft the scope of work, somebody responding to that scope of work as we've identified, and providing you with the service and the, after we check the references, the capacity to do this work is who we'll recommend to you. So I do believe that for your next meeting, I will have a recommendation on that procurement, as well as have conducted this work. So we'll get it done this week with everything coming into being next week. We'll do the review and have it ready for your review at your next meeting.
Okay.
And then I think depending on the selected contractor's backlog, hopefully that's happening maybe early April and wrapped up before the month is out.
It sounds like a very quick turnaround in terms of project construction work. So you're right. As soon as we can get it into their schedule, it should not be more than a few days.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. We'll pass over meeting minutes tonight. And the last thing before the joint meeting would be a review of the Arch Street Force Main Replacement Project, IFB. Say last.
Was a larger email that you got last week. Yes.
Yes. My understanding, we reviewed this, I want to say, a couple months back with Time Bond and Peter and everyone.
Correct.
And the only changes to date that I'm aware of on this is the work that was done for the right of way. Is that right?
Correct. We have that pretty well ready to go. We've reviewed it with the landowner, and that's something that we'll have to take to town meeting. And we'll discuss that obviously when we get to the ATM track. But yeah, everything else is almost identical to what you discussed before. There's a slight change in the probable cost opinion from, if I gave you the 75% one in your email, along with the 100% opinion probable cost, and they've changed slightly, but not greatly. There's a little bit more, about $6,000 more on the construction phase engineering that we had previously considered back in November, to the chairman's point. But largely this project is still on track with the probable cost. They've carried the 10% construction contingency. They've carried the 20% materials. Again, you discussed that with Pete Valinsky back in November. And you also back in November discussed treating the work near the headworks as an alternate as Alt 1. So they have broken that out in the bid documents for you.
Okay. And I know we asked this last time, that 1635 versus our current funding available or borrowing authorization, is that
Right.
slightly higher?
It is slightly higher. You have a total of 1.57, I believe, is the total borrowing authority.
Okay. Now the 193, is that separate from that funds or is that included?
That's included, unless you all wanted to go to town meeting to request an additional appropriation, which you have sufficient funds in retained earnings. We could do that. Or we could do a separate borrowing authority if you wanted to for that.
So at the moment, we're hoping that the competitive market comes in well under the 1.8.
Correct. I think based on the conversation that I recall from November and Pete Valinsky's experience with the competitive bidding market as of last year, I think he was starting to see projects carry this 20% materials piece. And so that's why he was recommending it. I think this is the first project that we've all seen that contingency held in here. My understanding from his conversation was that horizontal work like this was fairly competitive, and there were a lot of interested bidders in the market. I don't know if that stands true in the market for this year. And he thought that maybe that 20%, obviously for good reason, is a contingency, but may not be something that you have to rely on. So if that's the case, I remember him saying it would bring you right back in. If you didn't need that 20%, it would bring it right back in into line with that original estimate that we had from 2 years ago. Whether or not that's truly the case, we won't know until we do the process.
Okay. I'm sorry, Bill, I think you had a question.
No, I was kind of lost on the 1.57.
So
okay.
Back when you started this project almost 2 years ago, so
Yeah.
I remember that the early conceptual estimates, and that may have been based on what we believed to be the route at the time, had come in at $1.57 million. So we went to town meeting, we secured a borrowing authorization vote. So that's what the chairman was referring to. Since we began the permitting work and further the conceptual design until we got to the 75% hearing, we realized that we had wetlands to work around. We had right-of-way work in the middle of Route 2 to do. We had to change where we crossed, and so now we're crossing across private land under the railroad tracks. So the scope of work has changed slightly. It's the same approximate linear feet, but now we have new obstacles that we're working around, and that has increased the cost.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Brian did start the conversation with the treasurer about beginning the work for the borrowing authority, which would come soon if we
Good.
have a successful IFB. So timeline, Brian, is it's going to go out is Wednesday unless we don't approve tonight. Is that correct?
That's correct. Everything's ready to go for Wednesday. Here's the advertisement that will be going live. And the deadline should be March 30th. Is for the non-mandatory pre-bid conference. So we will do that. Where's that final date? It's an April date.
Is it about a 30 day? Is that what we're doing?
It was, I want to say it was almost the week of April 18th. My calendar doesn't want to open.
So say there
I
were
can
so
see
many
the videos.
files. I'm not sure what's in.
Let's see. Excuse me. I believe it's going to be the week of April 19th. It wouldn't be on the 19th because that should be a holiday. So it'd be later in the week, is my recollection.
Okay, that gives me an idea. So it'll be a couple weeks up to the optional pre-bid meeting, and then a couple weeks to finalize them. So at
Correct.
the end of April, we'll know where we stand.
Oh, there it is. It's April 14th. It just wasn't bolded out like I didn't expect. There we go. So instead, it's the week before on that. Is that the Friday?
Okay, that's Wednesday.
Yep.
Wednesday. Okay. I'm okay with the timeline. I'll keep my fingers crossed on the cost, and I didn't see anything else of note. Bill, did you?
No, I'm fine with the timeline as well. Is this something we're going to approve tonight, or we're going to wait a week?
If you would all be so kind as to just authorize us to release this, this project for procurement, we'll at least start the process.
Okay. Well, I authorize the movement and the procurement for the Arch Street Sewer Force Main replacement.
I will second that. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we will get this out the door this week.
Okay, and then we were just a couple minutes before our joint meeting begins. We will not hold a meeting next Monday. So our next meeting will actually be the special town meeting on March 27th, tentatively pending rain, at 9 a.m. Or what I was proposing, Bill, was to do 9 a.m. excuse me, at the elementary school, an hour before the special town meeting, so we have a little time to prep. If there's
Okay.
anything to cover, we can cover any general business that's come up. Would you be interested in holding kind of a full agenda that day, even if we were after the STM, rather than coming back on Monday, or do you have a preference?
I don't have a preference now, but I might. Linda and I are due to have our second shot on Friday evening
Okay,
before the annual. And so I'm not considering that all the stories I've heard about how you feel after the second one. I know we were a little tired after the first, but it'd be based on how I'm feeling or how we're feeling. So so I don't have a definite answer, but as it stands now, whatever you're comfortable with doing, I'd be happy with it.
okay. Well, let me see how the information, how the materials pile up and the things we need to
Okay.
cover, and then what I'll probably do is, if it seems manageable, we'll put it on the agenda, and then we can make a decision that morning
Okay.
whether we're going to handle it all or continue on. And we'll post for Monday anyway, so that we
Okay.
have it as an option. we can always choose to skip it.
Right.
And we may end up, are you open to a meeting later next week if we do need to cover something before the STM?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, that may be another option. Any other topics you have or anything on for the next meeting?
I have nothing.
Well, with that, it is 7 p.m., so I will call the joint meeting with the Finance Committee and the Capital Planning Committee to order at 7 sharp for once. Good evening, everyone.
Ben. Looks like we have Linda with us and Deb.
Yeah, we got Ben and Dan. So a couple things to finish up. Oh, full house now. The kind of the final review of the budget and revenue, and then we have the annual town meeting warrant draft to go over. And then just the other thing, which is what I'll start with, is just a heads up. I know we circulated an email about it, but just a kind of for the group, the generator for POTW number 1 that had failed, that we had estimated on the STM for $80,000. We've got the final engineer estimate of probable cost in a week or so ago, and it came in at $120,000. So a bit more than we had originally discussed. So I just wanted to give everyone that update. It is coming out of wastewater retained earnings account, which does have sufficient funds to cover it. So we did adjust the STM warrant accordingly, and so that's what went out to the public. And then we left off the vote since obviously Capital and FinCom hadn't heard that new information. So at this point, it does not have a recommendation either way from those two groups. So I just wanted to let you all know, obviously at the meeting, if you want to voice an opinion, you're welcome to, but we had to make that change before we printed. So I wanted to let all of you know. From there, what did you pull up first, Brian? The budget?
I've got them all ready here, so you just tell me which one you want to go to first.
You've got the ATM draft. Let's start with that. That's fresh information.
Okay. Just see, Charlie just joined us, and just get Charlie on here. Charlie.
Sure.
Okay.
And the majority of this information is drawn from the budget review, so a lot of it's not going to be new.
Correct. Actually, almost all the articles are all budget related, other than the first 4, which are the standards. Real quick, in terms of the select board and the annual town election, I've left a few things highlighted on here that the town clerk and you need to work on the details for. Last year, we had reduced the polling hours because of the state of emergency from 12 to 7. That needs to be revisited. With the new bylaw, the election will be held on Monday, May 3rd, excuse me. So we just need to figure out the polling times. And I know that there's currently some legislation that the town clerk is watching that has to do with early voting requirements. And so he wants to speak to you about that probably at your next meeting. So that's likely a conversation that we should plan for. So that's why that's still highlighted. Okay.
We also need to make a decision on location and timing too, if we're going to do an indoor or outdoor, and where that'll be. Right?
Correct, all of those things. For my note-taking purposes, should I anticipate that there will be any recommendations on any of the articles tonight, or is this tonight just a first review, which is what I was anticipating?
FinCom, that's mostly directed to you.
I know that we've
What do you
gone
think,
through.
Chairman Ben?
What, Dan? You said something?
I said, what do you think, Chairman Ben?
No, we've seen everything here before.
True.
I believe the only thing that we usually do is we have the one final vote at the end to
Right.
accept. And I was just planning on doing that unless anybody else had any different thoughts about it.
I'm happy with recommending at the end. I've gone through all of them from what Brian sent. And then if there is any change just prior to the ATM, we any substantial change, we could discuss it. But I'm happy enough with what's there tonight to vote at the end as finance. I don't know if Deb still has a thought on it.
Okay.
Anybody else have any thoughts?
Brian, the only thought I have is on Article 7, which
Okay.
there's some issues with.
Okay. So what I'll do is I'll try to keep track of the discussion that you're all having, and if you are thinking that you'll make some type of motion potentially at the end, I won't worry about trying to create space in my minutes for every article. I just want to make sure I was planning accordingly. So as we noted, articles. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, Deb is gonna try to rejoin. We're having some internet speed technical difficulties or something, so.
Okay.
But you can continue.
Articles 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all of the standard ones. So 1 is just the acceptance of the town report for 2020. 2 is the authorization to allow the select board to apply for federal and state grants. 3 is the authorization for the select board to be able to dispose of surplus property. And 4 is an authorization for the treasurer and the tax collector to enter into compensating balance agreements for the fiscal year. Again, those are all the standard ones that usually have a few questions, so we always put those up front. Does anybody want me to answer any questions about those ones or delve deeper? Okay.
No.
To the chairman's earlier point, most of this warrant has to do with the budget that you've all been working on since December. So article number 5 is your overall general operating budget. So these are all of the departmental budgets except for the school and the education appropriations, as well as the capital. And now that you finished the budget review last week, I was able to finally build this article. So thank you for doing that work.
I do have a question on this before you move on.
Yeah.
I don't need an immediate answer, but I would like an answer because we're always asked this at town meeting.
Yeah.
How does the grand total compare with last year? What's the dollar difference and the percentage difference?
Okay.
And while I'm here, I'll ask the same thing about the elementary school education. What's the dollar increase and the percentage increase? And the
Okay.
third one, while I'm here, balance of the stabilization fund, they're always going to ask. So
All of those things, when we get to the budget review, I've been building those into the overview in section 1. So let's
Okay.
see if those charts answer those questions, and if they don't, I can go back and add more for you.
okay, thank you.
Absolutely. We try every year to add a little bit more to the budget book so that we can answer those questions while we're going through it at town meeting. So that's a great point. Okay. And I should just note, while we're going through this part, I have Deb Merrow going through every one of these articles in comparison to the budget book as another set of accounting eyes. Dick Newton and town council will also be going through this over the coming week and to make sure that they don't see any omissions or things that they have concern about. So there will be more sets of eyes from everybody's different lens looking at this. Article 6 is the elected official compensation article. We're required by statute to set a salary for all elected officials. And so this is an article that we've developed over the last few years and added more and more definition every year. So this year, what I've added is the chair stipend. That's a new column that you didn't have in the past. That was something that you all discussed back in the fall when we were working on elected official compensation. So I don't know if that presentation feels the clearest to you all. Just to give you a sense of how we get to each one of these, the top section are all of the boards and commissions that have elected officials. So we give the set wage that is set for each of these boards that's then shared by however many members are in each of those committees. So we do a wage per member. And then there's this additional chair stipend that exists for whomever holds that title. The next section below the select board would be the tax collector, the town clerk, the treasurer, and the tree warden. So those are the 4 individuals who are elected and hold sole office. So their compensation is a little more directly calculated. And then it's all one final appropriation at the end.
I don't have any question or comment on these specifically, Brian, but I did notice in the table of contents, it says FY21 elected official compensation.
Did I miss a heading?
It's on page 2, I think.
Yeah, all of the table of contents is fed
Oh.
the titles. So I will fix it there. It will automatically fix it there. Thank you
So I
for
guess it
catching
is
that.
on this. Yeah.
Brian, I got a question, Brian.
Yes, sir.
What are the asterisks?
Good question. So down here at the bottom of the table, it's telling the voters where that money's coming from.
Okay,
So-
you didn't go down that far.
Yeah, sorry about that. Each of these line items is setting the compensation, but it doesn't raise it. The money for each of these articles is raised somewhere else. And so to your point, those asterisks speak to each one of those where the citizen can find that raising article.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you. I should have said that. So thank you. Any other things you'd like me to address about Article 6? Okay. Article 7 is the school, well, specifically Irving Elementary School's funding. Is also inclusive of the school committee salary.
So Article 7
Yes, sir.
has a value of $3,295,920, and written out to say that as well in the first paragraph, but it doesn't match anything in the bottom half of Article 7. Those numbers don't match the numbers below.
The numbers
Also,
below-
Also, elementary is spelled wrong in the heading.
You guys are good.
You're such a
You
school
beat me
team.
to it.
This is why we do group review. You guys can catch all of these phones.
The other thing is, why is the school committee salary included in that? Because it was just in the previous article.
It's not, so sorry if I wasn't articulating it correctly. The previous article was setting,
Yep.
establishing or creating the dollar
Okay.
amount.
Okay,
The money to raise it, as you can see in the first line here, is to raise and appropriate. So for every elected official, we're going to raise it somewhere, and then we're also going to fix it as required by Mass General Law. It's a 2-step process for officials.
okay.
I think Peter, I think the reason that the statutes require this, there may have been some ambiguity in other towns. I don't know if Irving was ever a concern, where maybe it wasn't very clear what the elected officials were getting for compensation. And so the statutes evolved to want an explicit article that states it.
Okay.
Okay, so I will fix elementary in the title, and I will also fix the dollar amounts. I'm just going to quickly pull back up my budget spreadsheet and just verify that it should be what's in the grid. That is what it should have read. Okay. So, Selectman Benbury, the grid is correct. So I will update top section to make sure it matches. Okay. Anything else on Article 7 that you want to review? Okay. Article 8 is the secondary education funding, and this is specifically related to your tuition agreement with Gil Montague School District. It also is inclusive of your special education costs for your secondary students. Any questions that you'd like me to address? Next article will be the technical school. This is your annual assessment. This is your capital improvement assessment. And this also includes the salary for our representative to the tech school. Any questions you'd like me to address? Article 10 is for the water department. So we're looking to appropriate the sum of $103,453. So this is the number that is what we budgeted for in your earlier conversations with the water superintendent. So this is to be raised from the operation of the water department through receipts. Any questions or concerns that you'd like me to address? Okay. Article 11 similarly is for the wastewater department. The funding of the enterprise fund for the wastewater department has two aspects to it. You raise and appropriate out of taxation and fund a significant portion of the operation. And then the balance is sourced from the town of Montague for the treatment of wastewater in the village of Millers Falls per a long-term agreement that the towns have had in place. So to reverse engineer out what we need, we set the budget. We determine from the agreement what portion Montague is paying, and then the rest is raised and appropriated by the voters. So this article accomplishes that. Any concerns? Okay. Twelve is the reoccurring articles. We do these as one group. These used to all be separate articles in the past, and I think it was about 3 years ago, the two boards decided to collapse these into one article because they were so standard. So this is your assessors revaluation appropriation, funds in the support budget for the restoration and the preservation of permanent records, an article for general town building maintenance, and that supports all the town buildings shy of the school, advertising space within the around town, and then our annual appropriation into our OPEB account for $300,000. Any questions or concerns you'd like me to address?
Brian, you said the OPEB account, we'd have a balance of that as well?
Would you like the balance?
Yes, please.
Give me one moment, sir. This will be as of June 30 of 2020. The balance as of June 30, 2020 was $4,499,479. So what would be missing was that you had annual town meeting last year in July because of the delay with the state of emergency. So the $300,000 that you appropriated for this year has not been deposited into this account yet. So that will be added to this balance. And then any interest potential losses from the investment portfolio have not been factored into that balance. But as of the close of the books last year, that was the balance.
Brian, would it be accurate to say that with that 300 plus this 300 will be right over 5 million? 5.1, 5.2, something like that?
I believe that's accurate, sir. Yes.
And how much are we shooting for to get in there as a total to cover all of these, unfunded costs? Do we know? Have any particular goal?
That's a fantastic question. So the actuaries look at this every 2 years, and the treasurer and I will be working on this, I believe, later this year to get a new actuaries goal. But yes, I can get that report to you all. So the actuaries, they look at our potential liabilities, they look at our employee and our payroll every time they do the assessment, and then they alter our goal. So I know that we are getting close to being fully funded. I can get you the exact goal from them, and I can share that with all of you.
Okay, and I know that fully funded is a moving target, depending on a variety of things, but just
Yes.
a general idea is fine. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll get you that information.
Okay.
I think I was speculating that we must be close to fully funded, right? I mean, that doesn't say we don't need to put some in probably every year, but I'm wondering if hopefully it can go down from 300.
You may be
Right.
able to.
I think Brian would remind us we are uniquely enabled to actually be funded where most are not, or potentially fully funded, which will be very interesting to hear. So I'm excited to get that report.
I will get that for you. Okay. Any other questions on this article?
None.
Article 13 is your capital improvement article. And I take this from the plan that you all have worked on with the capital improvement committee. And then if we already have an established account number, some of these things have been funded in past years, cruisers, defibrillators, things of those nature. We have an account number that we can reuse. So I will put that account number in here. If it's something that we haven't done in recent years and we don't have a current account number, I've indicated that. So this should reflect, and obviously you are the three committees that can correct me if I'm wrong, this should reflect the final conversation you all had 2 weeks ago as to what you wanted to raise and appropriate. This does not include the sewer improvement that we're paying for with a grant or the sidewalk improvements that we're paying for with a grant. This is solely what the town is raising and appropriating.
That looks correct to me.
All right.
Brian, just a comment in the thread of reusing articles. Should we potentially change number 9 just to be park grant writer or grant writer or recreation department grant writing or something to be more generic if we do another one down the road in 5 years and we don't have to create another account?
Sure. So I will change that to be just park grant writer. The description that goes in the budget book, and you'll see this when we get to that section, has a description of each of these projects and what it's specifically for this year. So the level of detail won't be lost. It will still be in the budget book. The two things should go together as companion documents. Okay. Any other questions you want me to review? Okay. Article 14. So at your last meeting, we had a conversation about, and I believe this was with the finance committee. I think this came after the joint meeting with the capital planning 2 weeks ago. We had a conversation that we may need to move around a project to repair the Route 2 pump station that emerged over the last few weeks. We thought it was a small repair, and instead it's turning into something that could be a couple tens of thousands of dollars. So we had already tentatively planned to expend those funds on a smoke and dye testing project for the wastewater system. DEP is requiring this of us, and it needs to begin this year. So this is a regulatory requirement. And you need a few months to get this prepared and work with the citizens and then conduct the work and then report back to DEP. So the project is just shy of $60,000 because we need to do this other repair work first. I explained to to the select board and the FinCom that I would request that we put on the annual town meeting warrant an article to appropriate from retained earnings for this project. So that's what this article represents.
Is this going to be a yearly thing?
If Pete is still on, he can correct me. I don't believe it has to necessarily be every year. It's going to depend what's found when we do the work. And then there will be some type of follow-up. I don't know if it will be an annual. I don't believe it will be an annual, but there will be some repetition of this process going forward to ensure that there are no new connections to the system that are unauthorized.
Pete is not on anymore, but this is, I believe, heavily derived from the INI testing and data. So when they see that there's a lot of INI, DEP is expecting us to find and resolve wherever it's coming from, and hence the finding or requirement that they sent to us that it was not basically optional to do this. We needed to now do it and actually, do the testing and then take whatever action to eliminate the causes.
Correct.
So hopefully we do it and the numbers are down. We don't have to do it very often, or it'll, again.
I think to your point, it's going to depend on what our findings and our corrective action plan is.
And we didn't choose to potentially fund this from RNA or anywhere else because we didn't have it, right? Is that why we're using the retained earnings?
This came to, well, we knew we were going to work on this project. The need to source it on the annual town meeting warrant versus doing it the way that we had been planning for the last few weeks was a recent development. So it came after your budget setting process. You could revisit it in a different manner if you wanted to. It was more of a suggestion.
I only ask, I guess I asked the group, and I don't think we've really had a discussion lately about where do we want our wastewater enterprise fund to be in terms of the right balance to mitigate any potential risk of needing to retrofit a plant someday, which is why the balance is high currently. But I know we've been spending that down for different projects along the way, and so I don't know if that's where we want to keep going or not. And maybe $60,000 request for this coming year in the last minute kind of thing is not the time to figure that out, but it's probably a discussion to have about where should that account be at some point.
Okay. We can, I think the last time the two boards, the FinCom and the Select Board, had this conversation was when you were setting your financial reserves policy. So maybe what I could do is get you your, you'll see the balances when we get to that screen, but I could send you back that financial reserves policy and we can maybe update it if there's a specific target you all want to maintain.
Sounds good to me. FinCom, does that work?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay,
Sounds good.
I will send that. So are there changes that you all want me to make to this article, or are you okay with it for now?
I'm okay with it for now, but if Pete is, that's a good discussion to have of, how much are we going to need moving forward? I mean, it's occasionally, periodically, you have to paint the outside of the inside of the tank. It's real expensive, and there are other things in the well, that's the water system, not wastewater. I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
if Pete knows that this is okay, it's fine with me because I don't have the expertise to tell you it should come from here or there. How much should be built up in that account?
Right. I think it's been, other than some big projects that you all have funded, I think you all used to maybe have a practice of budgeting a more generalized sewer maintenance line item where maybe things like this would have come from in the past. I think those were larger appropriations. And then the most recent years, you all have been budgeting for more discrete capital projects. So I think maybe it's also part of a conversation about, are you continuing that trend where we would bring a $60,000 request specifically to you all like this? Or is it more, advantageous to have a more generalized maintenance account with a certain balance that you keep in it. How you do it is up to the two, well, actually all three boards, because this is a capital project. So it's really up to all of you as to how you want to proceed.
I think we might be better equipped when we get through this year between the break fixes we've had and then the results of the smoke and die will tell us what kind of work has to be done there potentially. So
Sure. Okay.
I don't have any concerns leaving it as is for this time.
Okay. All right. Article 15 is your annual revolving accounts. We have to, even though these are all set by bylaw, we have to every year reauthorize the spending limits. Just got another 2020 I got to change. Change FY22. Other than that, these are the currently authorized revolving accounts that are in your bylaw. Any questions or concerns? Okay. The next one is your appropriation into the capital stabilization account. At your meeting 2 weeks ago, you all discussed appropriating $150,000 into that account, and I'm suggesting that we take that from free cash.
And how much free cash do we have?
Let me pull that up for you.
After that article, none.
That's a fair point.
Pretty much spends it all.
When we started, or currently until we have town meeting in 2 weeks, we currently have $587,649. The warrant that's being mailed to all of your homes this week is proposing that we will appropriate $377,000 of that into various purposes. So that's going to leave you with a balance of $210,000, 649. So this article takes 150 of that 210 and puts it to use. That gives you a balance of 60,000, just over 60,000. So in my next article, Article 17, I'm recommending that you take that balance of that $60,000 and use it towards the general stabilization account, along with some raising and appropriating.
So between the two warrants, effectively $649 will be left at most.
Correct. Right. And that will just roll into the next
As
free
tight
cash.
as we've spent it in a long time.
Correct. Again, keep in mind that prior to last year, in previous years, you would have your annual town meeting warrant, and then at the end of June, you would have a special town meeting and you would do this cleanup. Last year, you combined those two financial acts that you used to do at two separate meetings into one meeting, where you were trying to do all of your financial work to the best of your ability at one. So this is only our second year of doing it this way. Any concerns with these two? Okay. Let's see.
Did you verify if that is the third payment?
I have put that question to the town accountant just to verify for me. I believe it should be the third. Last year, I believe, was the second. So I just want to confirm that before we commit it to print. And then the very final article that I included in your draft ATM is the authorization to dispose of 18 Pleasant Street. That's the former graded school building. And so this would be a article that the voters, if approved, would be authorizing the select board to convey, lease, rent, sell, whatever they believe to be the best interest of the town.
Disposition is spelled wrong in the title.
Position.
What was
That's what I
that?
was gonna ask.
Sorry, Jake.
It doesn't look right.
That's what I doing this first thing in the morning.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
all good. It's nice to not be the one that catches them all.
I will correct that. And this is setting the stage legally so that the select board can conduct an RFP process later in the year and hopefully get this facility transitioned over to an owner that is better suited to care for it and put it back to full use.
And put it back in the tax rolls.
That's the goal. That's the goal.
Sounds good to me.
So then I gave you, I think, a few additional items that as soon as I sent it to you all, I said, there's a few more things that I don't know that we've had a chance to discuss yet that I'm going to want to at least make you aware of and ask if you want to see them on the ATM.
Before you dive into those, Brian, I just going back on a couple articles, I had a couple comments I didn't bring up in time.
Okay.
If you don't mind going back to Article 3.
So how this going? There you go.
In the in the article information, if you just want to add to the end of to that is determined to be surplus per the town's surplus property policy or something, because I know that was brought up in a couple of the last meetings, and so just to call out that we would dispose of it per the policy in the article information may be helpful.
Okay.
If that makes sense to everyone.
Okay. Information about, okay.
Article 5. In the comments for the article information section, it's, I don't know if that's supposed to be detailed and capital D, but it starts kind of funny. That's supposed to be detailed with a capital D.
I believe
That's
so.
information, or did something get truncated?
I will go back and look at the source of that. It should have been truncated, but it's possible that over time it did. I will correct that.
And the last thing was just on 6, under the compensation, elected official compensation. There's a reference to selectmen and water commissioners. I don't know if we want to change that bill to select board and water commissioners to be consistent.
I'll make that correct.
Sure, yes.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay. Okay, so there's a few additional items that have come up throughout the last few weeks that will require some action. And I'm personally of the opinion that we should probably do this at the ATM. But obviously that's a decision for you all to make. So the first one is the securing of an easement for the forced sewer main project that we're about to do. It leads from Arch Street Pump Station onto Route 2 and then down to POTW number 2. The easement will cross a private parcel occupied by Tim's RV. The town has been in communication and collaborating on this with the owner of the property for several months, almost a year probably at this point. So all parties are on the same page about doing this work. But the legal granting authority for securing such an easement comes from the voters. So I've already drafted an article for this. It's with legal counsel to make sure it's in good legal form. And obviously the select board is preparing to do the procurement or start the procurement for this project now. So I believe that town meeting is likely the best time to get this done. I don't know how you all feel.
I
Without a
agree.
doubt, it needs to be done, so we can't move the project forward without it. And I guess my only question is, can we definitely get this process completed before the annual?
I've already had the easement paperwork drawn up, so that part's done. The survey's been completed, and the initial plans prior to being printed on the Mylars was already submitted to the property owner for comment and for feedback, and we received approval as presented. So from that standpoint, as much preliminary work that can be done has been done. At this point, it's securing the legal permission, and then it would be a vote for the two of you at a select board meeting once you have the legal authority to do it, to sign your portion, have the same signed by the owner of the property, and then get it to the registry for recording. So yes, we could get all of those things done.
Thank you.
This is similar to the easements that we secured when we did the sidewalk project on Route 63. So it's a slightly similar process. The second one, I know we've discussed this before, and I had hoped that I would have had more progress on this. It's been very challenging to get a meeting with a local access TV station on this topic. I'm not sure why. But anyhow, we were hoping to launch the PEG access channel this year. We finally completed the fiber connections with Comcast at all three buildings. So now the senior center, the library, and town hall are all connected to the fiber. And town hall was set up to be the broadcasting location. So all of those connections should originally, well, they're on the system, but the system points back to town hall as the broadcasting location. So at this point, we're ready to specify the equipment that we need and purchase, but we need somebody who's has the knowledge, experience, and training to operate this and run this for us, and that exceeds who we have on staff right now. So we are trying to work with one of the local access TV stations who has this type of expertise to work with us and get the final pieces with Comcast set up. The first year is always going to be the most challenging because you have a new relationship to sort out and to build on, and there's some first time things that you need to accomplish that may be a little more resource intensive, but after that it's mostly operation and ongoing maintenance. So I've been trying to meet with somebody to get a sense of what that first year budget would look like and bring it to you all, and to date that has not been successful, but I also don't want to run out of time. As of right now, it doesn't appear in your ATM, and if we miss it, we won't have an operating budget to work from. So you have an account balance. The issue is not, do we have money for this? We do. It's sitting in an account waiting for it to be appropriated. The question is, I guess, would you be okay knowing that we don't necessarily have a proposal in front of you to look at, but would you be okay with an article on the annual town meeting warrant that would appropriate what we bring in each year? We bring in approximately $15,000 a year for this purpose. So an article to appropriate $15,000 to allow the select board to enter into an operation agreement for the PEG access channel is probably about as specific as we could get at this point.
What do we have for a balance there, do you know, to draw from, roughly?
Let me pull that up. My belief is that we are nearing 140,000.
Well, I wouldn't think there'd be any problem with 15 then.
No, you have sufficient funds. We're approximately 140,000.
Can I ask a question, Brian?
Right.
Because I know that in Montague's contract, it encourages them to produce shows for another town like Irving.
Mhm.
So are we thinking that we're going to have our own PEG access channel like Montague, or are we going to jump into Montague's?
We have our own. We just aren't programming on it. It's been
Oh.
waiting for us to act for a decade. And I know Bill's worked on this before, and
So have I.
so in the last, and this has been a long time coming. So in the last franchise agreement, we worked with Comcast and the Cable Advisory Committee to get ready to do this work. And so the physical infrastructure is now in place. The question is the operation. The goal is to work with either Montague or Greenfield or one of the local community access television stations. They obviously have to want to work with us, and there has to be some type of contractual piece. So even if Montague has something in there about working with other towns like Irving, the town of Irving still needs to have some legal agreement in place so that they can operate our channel for us on our behalf. And there's certain protocols that have to be in place. So we have to be able to go through the contracting process, which we have not been able to do to date. And there very well may be some additional operation costs incurred by this, staff time to record or edit the videos or do those pieces, and we would be responsible for compensating for that. And these funds are specifically designed for that purpose. So I do anticipate that the board will have some form of an agreement with one of these entities that will be negotiated. But if there's no matching appropriation, they won't be able to complete the negotiation, I guess is my concern.
Has anybody answered you from Montague or no?
We played phone tag for a few weeks, and I'm still waiting for a response to my most recent communications.
Okay.
Could I ask, just to anticipate a question, one of those other questions we don't need an answer to tonight, but I anticipate when this comes up, someone will say, well, when are we going to get this channel going? And as much as you'd like to start climbing a ladder from the top, you have to start at the bottom and go one rung at a time. And this is, to me, is starting our way up the ladder. But a year or two, maybe? Don't know.
My goal was to have it at least functioning for the purposes of select board meetings and the potential of town meetings this year. That's the goal. The future goal would be to also be able to broadcast special events, educational events from the library or from the senior community center when we can start having those again. So those are the eventual goals, and that may not happen this year. That may be something that happens in year 2 and later. But the first goal was to at least get broad access to the select board meetings and the town meetings, and it, in the in-between times can be used as a community bulletin board, so we can put up news and events and other things that would circulate on a billboard.
Dan, I hope that they do ask that question, because I used to volunteer and videotape the select board meetings in Montague. So the next question would be yes, and we'll need volunteers. So we'll hope they do ask.
Yeah, well, that's
You know,
one of
it's
those
funny,
things. Everybody wants it, but we need somebody to hold it together. Yeah. Thank you.
I was going to ask you, Linda, if you were looking for a part-time hobby. In case you have experience already.
Oh,
I should add that we already have one article that's, I believe we have 25 to 30,000 for equipment that we pulled from the PEG access funds. That article is waiting to determine what equipment is needed to start the process.
Right. As soon as we can get somebody with the expertise on to work with you on this, Mr. Bradbury, we should finally be able to spend those funds and purchase that broadcasting equipment and get it up and running. The last part of it really was getting the fiber connected at Town Hall, and that was completed beginning of February, end of January. So we're ready to get that portion done. Now it's the expertise piece, and we can hopefully close the loop on this project.
Well, I'm also in favor of moving forward with the PEG access channel, and So I would like to see it on the annual.
Okay. I will try to be as specific as I can be, understanding that there's still factors that we don't have answers to. And I will have that ready for your next meeting. And then the very last topic, and maybe actually Dan Hammock will have some information on this, is the Cemetery Commission. We've been going down the bylaw review process, working on the town code, and we have several things that need updating and changing and addressing, and suggestions that come back from the different consultants working on this. So the town clerk, myself, and town council have been reviewing all of those revisions. And we got to the Cemetery Commission, and it's an article from 1949 that just says the town voted to authorize the town moderator to appoint a cemetery commission. And it says very little more than that. So that doesn't necessarily reflect what we do today. The select board issues the deeds. I don't know what transpired over the last several decades, but I do think that we want to clarify this language and either have it reflect exactly how we function today, or find a way to make what was approved years ago work with today's statutes. But maybe Dan has some historical knowledge to share that I'm missing.
I'll give it some thought and get back to you with more, but I don't recall there being a cemetery commission in way over the last 50 years. So it's just been the select board has acted as the commissioners, and when some action needed to be taken, the select board is consulted and they just decided. I wasn't aware of the 1941 thing. I came in the early 70s, and the guy before me was a single guy talking to the select board about it, and he was Lloyd Woodbury, and he referred me back to Pete Kruslick, who did it for umpteen years before him and kept all the records in his panel truck, which when he died, the records in the truck went to the junkyard. So I'm not aware of a commission ever having been set up that I'm aware of in maybe 75 years or more.
Wow.
So probably wouldn't be not a bad idea if you want to set one up, or might say if it's not broke, don't fix it or change it, whatever you guys want to do.
I think to your point, sir, that maybe if the town has been operating this way for almost 70 years, it's maybe just clarifying the bylaws so that they reflect what we're currently doing, and just make it really clear that the select board will serve in that fashion, as opposed to this other bylaw. Because we're going to bring the town code to the voters and say, here's the updated, meets the current standards, reflects our operations, meets the statutes. And if this vote from 1949 no longer reflects how we've operated for all this time, we should probably have it be accurate. So I don't know if you all want to review this language now, if it feels too rushed to do that, if it's something you want to look at later. Clearly, we've been operating this way for quite some time, but I wanted to at least make you aware that I feel like we need to do something to clarify this issue. We have a lot of work to do on the cemeteries this year, some repair work and the exploration for our new site. So I believe that there will be a lot of cemetery work later in the year.
The only other thing I would offer is, I mean, over the years, there have been a few personality conflicts, I guess I would say, but no substantive conflicts about how things have operated at the cemetery. And while I was there, it was taken over by the highway, the superintendent, that crew. And typically, there isn't a whole lot for any commission or the select board to actually do. Occasionally a question comes up and needs an answer. If you have another whole layer of government with 2, 3, 4, 5 more people in there, it's just, I don't see the reason to gum up the works of that, but the select boards, I don't make the decision, you guys do.
Right.
Just my thought.
Well, I would say that we're not prepared to take this to annual at this time. Later in the next fiscal year. Address it then.
Okay.
Brian, would we potentially cover that when we adopt the new town code? I mean, would that be also a point where we might do that at the same time because it'll be part of that document?
We could revise it that
Or do we
way.
need to do it sooner?
I'll ask that question to town council to see what the recommendation is. I think a lot of the question is going to be how long. I think we all, with rose-colored glasses, thought we would have the town code ready to present this annual town meeting. I think that was our initial goal, and that's very clearly not going to happen. Too many other things got in the way. So I guess the question is going to be the timing of when the town code project will be done, and whether or not this is one of those items you just want to have done beforehand. But I can ask that question of council.
Could you also ask, is this something that is required to be done at the annual or something that can be done as special?
It can be done at either. So that's
Okay.
more about board preference. It's a bylaw change. So it can happen at either one of those.
Okay.
Okay. So that's everything I had for town meeting and related topics. So the budget document, 2 weeks ago, you all reviewed a draft, and I had track changed a lot of the revisions throughout the narratives, and specifically a few tables where we had increased budgetary line items. We changed or had some suggested changes to the capital plan that you all reviewed and considered, and the ones that you approved are removed, and the ones that you asked me to put back in, for instance, the emergency communication line item, that went back in. So that document's been updated, and I accepted all of those changes. What was new, you had discussed at the last meeting, the stipends for EMD and the IT department. So I adjusted those two budgets. And then I built out section 1 of the budget document, which covers our revenue and our expense overview. Let me get you to that section. In the past few meetings, when you looked at it, it probably had a few yellow spots where it said insert chart here. So all of the charts are now in here, and it should accurately reflect everything you've discussed. And so, Dan, this may be that section where we were talking about if this doesn't quite answer your questions, maybe there's a different chart I could generate. The first one that we have in here is the overall pie graph of the full FY22 budget. This is everything from your operating expenses to your appropriations into the stabilization funds. And this was a graph that you all worked on last year as you were trying to respond to some questions that had come up at the previous town meeting, where there were just sort of an overall question about the town's finances and how the different articles within the town meeting warrant spoke to the budget plan process. So I know that this was a chart that you all spent a lot of time on last year trying to tell that story. In terms of the next one, you had asked last year that we break out the next 2 largest subsets of the budget. So the first is always education. So actually, let me scroll back up 1 second. Oh, I went too far, sorry. Too many pages in here, sensitive. Okay, so 42% of your budget is education expenses. So the breakdown of that is this pie chart. So of that portion, 63% of it is allocated to the elementary school, 28 to our secondary costs, and then the tech school is only 9%. Again, that was a chart that you all discussed last year, wanting to be able to give a little further definition about how the education costs break down. And this is based on the chart when you get to the education section of the budget. There's a table on that first summary page, and that feeds this chart.
Brian, can I just ask, this does have percentages of the budget of different items, different areas. I was more looking for just 2 or 3 general sort of bottom line percentages. Like,
okay,
you know, what was the budget last year for the general operating budget? And what is it this year? And what's the percentage of increase? Same with elementary education. we don't have much of any control over secondary or tech school. It is what it is. But those two are the biggest chunks of the budget. And as you know, they go up 1%, 7%. I don't know. I mean, we're just, it's easy enough to figure out compared to last year. And I don't know
Yep.
if these charts give us that.
Okay.
I'm not just saying you ought to put that in everybody's, packet or anything. I'm just inquiring, from a financial point of view, what is it? Anticipating a question.
So is that something that I can get that for your next meeting? And is it something that people envision having in the section here?
I don't see the need to put it in there unless somebody else wants to. I just like to know what it is, so if we're asked, we can tell people.
Okay.
And
And is
I
it just,
certainly no hurry.
is it a comparison for fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 21 only? Or is it more than one comparison? Is it several years that you want?
I'm happy enough with 1 year.
Okay.
It should be easy. What was the top 2-3 totals for last year? What are they this year? And do a little division and come up with a percentage.
I just want to make sure I give you what you guys are looking for.
Unless other people disagree or don't want it or want something else. I'm just looking for something simple and easy and quick.
Okay. Anybody else?
Brian, the only thing I noticed in the first pie chart, it had the breakdown of the 15% benefits, and the paragraph below the second indicated that OPEB was not included in the benefits package. I think that would probably be a good place to put the OPEB balance possibly from year to year, and what percentage of that it is. And
Okay. So we should,
So,
let me show where it is.
yeah, go ahead. I was going to say that the deposit this year is in the capital, or in the special article, I'm sorry, right?
Right. So if you go to the top of the chart here, it's a dark green wedge. It says special articles RNA, 380,500. That
Yep.
300 of that is your OPEB portion.
oh, okay.
So maybe I need to be clearer that it's up in that special article. But Selectman Benbury, to your question about over time, and we'll come back to OPEB. Right there. So down, I think it's 2 more pages down, and under the title of savings and investments, you've got your general stabilization, your capital stabilization, and your OPEB account.
Yep.
And we're trying to show that trend over time. So as we were discussing, it's nearing 5 million. So as at the end of FY22, we discussed that balance that Dan had asked for, and it's starting to chart on this bar graph here.
Mm-hmm.
So so it's in a couple places, and maybe that's not as clear as it probably could be. So you've got that annual appropriation, plus we've got this trend from FY17 through FY20 showing how it's growing over time.
Yeah, I think what I see, if I'm just looking at it from the community looking at it, it's not clear what type of funds are in the OPEB and how much it is. I think a balance and an ability to have a discussion with the community as to how OPEB can, at what level the funds are at now, can possibly reduce other funds later, isn't clear.
Okay.
And it's just making it a little bit more transparent.
Absolutely.
Could I ask one other, just a thought, and I don't know where you go with it. You may go nowhere with it. When you take all these things together, all of our reserve funds and stabilization funds and revenue that comes in and goes out, and education budgets, when the whole thing's a giant ball of wax, how much money the finance committee, select board, capital improvement, how much money the town administration is dealing with in a year? We're approaching $15-20 million worth of of funds here.
Mhm.
And I just think a general statement, Harry Truman, I think it was, I don't know who said it, Socrates, one of those guys, we get a lot done if we don't care who gets credit for it. I don't want any credit at all, because could call it blame instead of credit, but somebody would be nice to just a statement to people that they may not understand because they don't deal with it every day, that we're running a business, we're trying to run it in accordance with all state, federal laws, personnel policies and regulations, and we don't want to get sued by anybody. There's a whole bunch of stuff to consider. It's not 1943 anymore. And we got like a 10, 15, $20 million business that we're all just trying to manage here in the
Right.
interim. They come around 2, 3, 4 times a year for a town meeting, but they don't see all this stuff, and they may not understand the magnitude of they only like the tax bill. I understand the magnitude of that, but the magnitude of this giant business that we're all working on here. Just a
That's a good
thought.
point.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, let me see if I'll work with, sorry.
Go ahead. No, it's a good point. It's probably pushing 25 million total between operating expenses and savings accounts and all that.
Well,
It's
and
big enough
also-
so that if it was a regular private business, you wouldn't just let it drift. You have people who are participating frequently in what's going on, and just to help people understand a little better.
Well, I think to the points that you're all discussing, this, and I'm glad you're having this conversation because every year you find something new that you want to expand upon. So this is all, I think the fact that you're having these conversations is great. And the public, each year that you try to be more transparent in this process, they get more information than they had the year before. So this is a fun, the nerd in me is enjoying this conversation. The year's operating budget can wildly change depending on what you have going on. So we, in this budget document, are primarily talking about what you're raising and appropriating. It doesn't really get into grants. It does not get into the borrowing authorities unless one day we start to show a debt service on here. So for instance, the library project, in that 1 year, you authorized almost $5 million worth of project related expenses. So for a 1.5 year period, that wildly increased our overall budget beyond what we normally would, but that whole project had to be managed, and it wouldn't necessarily show up in a document like this. And so maybe there's a way for us, and I can try to put my head together with Debbie and come up with a table or a paragraph or two that would help describe what that looks like. This is the operating budget from a raise and appropriation standpoint, but here's these other things that can drastically change what the town is operating on each year, depending on what projects the voters approve. So we can try to put some language together for you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Work in progress.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so let me go back to where I left you off. So the second largest group of related costs would be your benefit breakdown. The largest driver is always your health insurance, so that's on here, followed by retirement. And again, this does not include the OPEB portion, as we discussed, that's back in that special article. And I will work on language to clarify that.
Brian, underneath that, it refers to no new growth here in this table, but we did put in the pilot,
Oh,
the source of the revenue there.
thank you for catching that. Okay, I will fix that. I did update the chart with all of the revenue sources that we've discussed. And so to Pete Mallett's earlier question, how much were we talking about for available free cash? Assuming that the STM that is scheduled for March 27th is successful, I've already reduced in this table the available free cash for the annual town meeting, so that when folks are looking at the budget document and the annual town meeting document, that free cash number matches. So hopefully that helps.
You know, we've talked about the overlay a few times, and I don't know if there's a chart in here for it. That's another one that, is there visibility to what it is? And I think we had some open questions about what was the balance, and what is the minimum that we need to put in every year. And I don't know if we have that data yet. It's been out there for a little while.
I have not gotten an answer from the principal assessor yet. I know she was drafting something. I do know that we currently have just under 1.5 million in the account, but the other portions of that question are all assessing related questions. So.
And I was just thinking, as we talked about large balances, I mean, we're showing capital stabilization, which is much, much smaller. We may want to show a trend of time of what that account holds, just to keep consistent about all of our funding that's out there.
Okay. I can work with the assessors on that.
Even if we just start with a 3-year like we have on some of the other ones, it gives us some picture.
Okay, I'll work on that. The next category that you all worked on last year was showing a trend line on your undesignated fund balances, commonly referred to as free cash or retained earnings. So this is going to be your general fund as well as your wastewater enterprise and your water enterprise. And so this just shows you in general what you were trying to, well, I don't know that it was always a strategy. It is a strategy now. You have your financial reserves policy that you approved about 2 years ago. And for the general fund, the goal is approximately 5% of the operating budget. And so you've been maintaining that for at least, and as you can see here in FY20 and FY21, they both came in the $500,000 mark. That's approximately where we need to be to maintain the 5%. So yeah, I think maybe I can strengthen this section by tying it back to the financial reserves policy and having that conversation maybe with folks. And that sort of maybe springs into the conversation that the chairman was having around discussing what the goal is for the retained earnings balance and enterprise funds.
Brian, and maybe you know why, or maybe we should take a look, but FY20 wastewater enterprise looks significantly low all of a sudden, and maybe I'm not recalling something that moved that down $400,000.
What was the project? We had this conversation last year. What was the project? There was a project and we went to the voters and asked for an appropriation.
But if we dropped it 400, we didn't put 400 back in there, did we? So why is it high in 21 again? I guess is my question. Just maybe we should check those numbers. It doesn't make sense to me.
The numbers are accurate, but I will get you that answer. I will tell you what happened.
Okay.
It came off the balance sheets, so I'll get you that answer.
Has it really been that much of a year that we forgot a $400,000 or $500,000 move? All right.
I don't know what we. Not that I wanted to remember, but this week is 1 year since we shut everything down. Okay.
Friday the 13th, March 13th.
Yep. Okay, we've already looked at the OPEB, your capital stabilization, and your general stabilization funds. Again, you had a withdrawal from that account to build the library, and we've been making plans to repay it. There's a appropriation that we did. There's actually 2 appropriations that you approved in October that are not reflected in this chart because this is only looking back at FY20, not FY21. So you will see just shy of 800 or just over $800,000 going into this fund, into the general stabilization fund. So that's going to significantly increase this balance for FY21. And that's part of our plan to repay. There was a MBLC payment that came in. There was our $273,000 commitment from the town. So this balance is going up fairly quickly, even though it sort of looks like it's leveled off last year. And as you all discussed earlier, the OPEB trust fund, I will get you those account balances. We discussed it earlier when Dan raised the question, but I'll find a way to work those totals in here. Sometimes you can have a chart like this, and it will also provide a table underneath with those balances. so you can get the specific dollar amount. Maybe a version like that would provide you with what you're looking for. So I could try that viewpoint. The dollar amounts are already in the table's already behind generating this chart, so that's not extra work. It's toggling on the different features of the chart. So I can do that for you.
Brian, the details above it reference 3 years, but now it's 4. I don't know if we want to say it's 4, or I don't see any reason to decrease it. I think you're trying to head to 5 years when we originally talked about it, but we are up to 4 now.
I will change that. And like I said before, I'm just double checking one more time with Debbie to make sure that we truly have put 2 full payments in, and that this will be the 3rd of those direct deposits back to the stabilization fund. The smaller funds that are harder to see on those larger graphs, we broke out as additional reserve funds, and that's the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund and our conservation fund. Again, they have small balances in them, so we broke them out into their own graph. And a little description last year, we worked on those to provide folks just a little understanding of what that is. And then the last chart that you all worked on last year, and I've already updated it with 2020, is your EQV. So in past years, we've always had a document in the beginning, a glossary that just sort of gave a very simple definition of what the EQV was. And it always was this sort of large topic at town meeting that we would point to when we were discussing what drives maybe the increased cost in an assessment at the tech school or to one of the other regional programs that we belong to. But there was nothing in the book that actually showed what the town's EQV was. So the select board worked with the FinCom last year. We put this chart together. And as I noted, the 2020 EQV was just released a few weeks ago. So I was able to put that into this chart as well. Just to give sense to the voters what the town's approximated value is at this time. And it's just shy of $1 billion. I don't know, again, if this would be something where an actual table beneath it with the actual dollar amounts is useful, or if this bar graph with the trends are simply illustrative enough.
The only thing I've considered is maybe putting, I don't know if it makes sense to put a document in or to note somewhere, the ranking in the county. I don't know if you put a listing underneath it that shows the county, the current, last time through the county, or just a note in the commentary that says we're, rated as the 2nd highest valued town in Franklin County out of 26, out of the town list. Something like that. I just think it's good for the voters to understand, though none of us are maybe happy about the fact that we're comparable to Montague and Greenfield in our EQV, but that's where we get put when we have to use those calculations.
Agreed. Okay. Yeah, I can try to update the either the narrative or put a footnote in here about that. If I was to do a ranking, would you want all 26 towns, or are you just looking for the top 5? And we're definitely in the top 5.
Top 5.
Top 5. Okay. We'll start there and see how you like it, and if you want something different, we can always change it. Okay. Okay. And I think that's everything I added in section 1. So that's only the new content. If you want, I can just show you what I did to the E&D budget and what I did to the IT budget. So I added the 2% rate change that we talked about and adjusted the budget accordingly. So nothing in the expense section changed. It was just in the wage and the salary section. And I did the exact same thing in the E&D budget. I don't know if that causes any questions or concerns. Okay,
I don't think so.
and that's all I changed. So it looks like I have some more work to do in section 1 and send back maybe some updated narratives, some footnotes, and maybe an extra chart or two, as well as toggling on the actual dollar amounts for the savings accounts. So I will make those revisions and get you all an updated copy in time for your next meeting.
So at the next meeting, we should have this kind of finalized with all the discussed changes. The annual town meeting warrant, do you expect to have a final draft with all the added articles and language by then as well?
I don't think there's any reason that I wouldn't. Yeah. I'm waiting on a response from council, which I should hear back by, I would say, Wednesday at the latest. So I could work in the feedback from council on the ATM. Debbie has been working on the budget review today, and she's going to continue this week, I believe. So I should have anything that she has questions or suggestions on back by the end of this week. So I don't think there's a reason that I wouldn't have it to you in time for the 27th.
Okay, well then, maybe unless there's anything else that comes up by then, we can adopt all of these on the 27th. I'll work with the town clerk on the election piece and the moderator on the timing. And if we can make changes or need to make changes in terms of location and timing, but we'll look at that and then we'll review what may be the final on the 27th before the STM. Are you all available to join us? Say maybe 9:15 that morning to do a joint before the STM at 10.
All right.
Looks like a majority.
As long as I'm feeling okay.
I'll try.
I've heard that.
Understood.
Totally understand. And assuming the weather holds.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'll get that ready for you all.
Anything else Capital or FinCom has for us? I think that was the last item on the agenda for tonight.
I don't have anything other than to thank the select board, Brian, for, putting all this stuff together. It's in a much more readable manner than we've ever been able to give to the people who live in town, that paying the bills. And with a capital committee also that's planning for the future. I just feel like we've got a real good foundation for whoever it is that comes after us. I'm pleased with how it's going, for whatever that's worth to anybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, great work on this,
Thank you to
Brian.
Brian I'm sorry, Ben, go ahead.
I said, great work on this, Brian. It looks great.
Thank you, sir.
Great. Okay, well, if there's no further business, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion
You're
to
also
adjourn.
here.
Or we can say if y'all want to. Was there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you
Aye.
all.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good
Good night.
evening.
Take care, you all.
Good night.
See you on Saturday the 27th.
One quick question before I leave. I came in late. Any news with the bridge?
No,
Not yet.
You haven't got the letter yet?
no.
Wow.
There'll be a mass email to you all as soon as we have it.
Frame it when you get it.
It must be that good.
God. Okay. Thank
Special
you.
paper they use.
Yeah.
Bye.
Night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, guys.